Hi, so you're getting into FPV flying, but are unsure if you should go fully digital or start first with analog? Well, here's my opinion. I started off myself about 6 months ago with flying FPV, and I went for the DJI FPV Fly More combo. But if I knew then what I know now, I probably would have done it differently. I made a list to get a good overview. On the left hand side there's the fully digital option, meaning you go for the DJI FPV goggles, air unit and transmitter, or the DJI FPV Fly More combo. And on the right hand side there's the fully analog option, meaning you get some Fat Sharks or some Sky Zone goggles, a VTX for your drone, and a separate transmitter in your drone. In the middle there's digital, so meaning the DJI goggles, the DJI air unit, but you decide to not get the DJI transmitter and get a Taranis instead, and you put the other receiver in your drone. If you go for the fully digital option, you are probably gonna pay the most amount of money, but you get in return that it's easiest to build a quad. So there's nowadays plug and play wiring harnesses on your flight controllers that straightly connect to your DJI air unit. It's also really easy to set up because all the DJI components link up to each other by the press of a button. But there's one really big downside to it, and that's that you cannot fly any tiny whoops with this system. So the air unit is quite heavy, and you basically cannot put it in something below a 2-inch drone, which is a really big downside in my opinion. Now, if you go fully analog, then you have the option to go as cheap as you can, which means you're at about maybe a third of the price of the DJI digital system. But of course you get worse FPV image. Everything is a bit more fragile, as you will need to solder a lot of wires, and which are very tiny. You need to solder them to your flight controller and your ESC. So it's the most difficult to build, and it's also more difficult to set it up because you need to set up all the buttons in your transmitter and so on. It's just a bit more cumbersome, but you have all the freedom that you want. Now, if you decide to go for the middle option, which is the DJI goggles, the DJI air unit, but you get a separate transmitter like a Taranis, or and you put another receiver in the drone, then okay, this will be slightly less expensive probably than the fully digital, depending of course on how much you spend on your transmitter. It requires you to build a separate receiver in each quad, so it's a bit more difficult. And it's also slightly more difficult to set up, as it's not anymore just pushing the DJI bind buttons to link up all the components. But in return, you get tiny whoop compatibility, which is a major point here in my opinion. So as I said in the beginning, I bought everything DJI to start off with, but I soon ended up buying also a Taranis, because simply I wanted to be able to fly a tiny whoop around in my basement or in my house just when the weather is bad. You can always do this, and it's virtually indestructible, this drone, which is huge fun. I ended up modding my goggles, as you can see here. Put an analog module on it, so I can just receive the analog image from my tiny whoop, and that combined with the Taranis provides me the ability to fly around this tiny whoop. So if I would start over, I think I would just get the Taranis, the DJI goggles and the DJI air unit, but not the DJI transmitter, because this Taranis I need anyway for my tiny whoop, and I don't want to give that up. So I would just build a receiver like an RXSR into each drone that I have and fly it around with this transmitter if I could start over. So to put things in perspective, well, here you see the smallest and lightest drone I have with a DJI Air unit on it. And here you see my Tiny Hawk 2, which is of course the analog drone. But this one, it only weighs like 40 grams. I can literally toss it around, have it bump into walls. It won't damage anything. It's so light that it's just super fun. You can throttle open, hit the tightest gaps, fly through chairs and everything that you want. But with this one, you're just not gonna do that. You can fly it inside, but yeah, it weighs more than 3 times the weight of the Tiny Hawk, and add a battery to that, it gets worse even. If you'll be flying this quite hard into the wall, your wall will have damage, and also the quadcopter probably will have damage. I'm not gonna toss this around as it's too expensive, so really for flying inside, this is the better option. And if you are thinking about that you want to do this, then get a Taranis, get a normal transmitter, and don't get the DJI transmitter. And make sure that then every drone that you build with the DJI Air unit, that you add a separate receiver in it. In summary, I would say go for the DJI, everything DJI if you can afford it, and if you only want to fly 2-inch and above quadcopters. If you also want to fly tiny whoops, then go for the DJI goggles and the DJI Air unit, but skip on the controller, the transmitter, and get a Taranis instead. And thirdly, if you cannot spare the money, then go analog. I hope this helps you out in making a decision. Thanks for watching, and see you on the next one.